The courthouse was suffocating, packed with bodies that reeked of sweat, tobacco, and righteous indignation. Evelyn Monroe stood before Judge Cornelius Blackwood, her spine straight despite the weight of 100 accusing stares boring into her back. The black mourning dress she'd worn for 3 weeks now hung loose on her frame, a testament to sleepless nights and meals left untouched since her father's sudden death. "Miss Monroe," Judge Blackwood's voice boomed across the courtroom, his jowls quivering with each word. "You stand accused of improper conduct and moral turpitude, having resided alone without proper male guardianship since the passing of your father, the late Judge Theodore Monroe." Evelyn's jaw clenched. 3 weeks. It had been only 3 weeks since she'd found her father slumped over his desk, his heart having given out in the night. 3 weeks of trying to settle his affairs, of keeping their modest home running, of mourning in private while the vultures circled. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear despite the tremor in her hands. "I have done nothing improper. I have merely been attending to my father's—" "Silence!" Blackwood's gavel cracked against wood. "A young woman of 23, unmarried, living alone? It is an affront to the moral fabric of our community. The good people of Perdition Creek will not stand for such scandal." The crowd murmured its approval. Evelyn recognized many faces. Mrs. Hartwell from the general store, who'd refused to sell her flour just yesterday. Mr. Jameson, who'd crossed the street to avoid her. Even Reverend Pike, who'd denied her father a proper eulogy at the funeral. "The court has reached its decision," Blackwood continued, his thin lips curling into what might have been satisfaction. "Miss Monroe, you have 2 choices. You may submit yourself to the Territorial Women's Reformatory in Yuma, where you will remain until such time as you are deemed morally rehabilitated." The blood drained from Evelyn's face. The reformatory was nothing more than a prison, where women were worked to death in the desert heat, their spirits broken by cruel matrons and endless labor. "Or," Blackwood leaned forward, his watery eyes gleaming, "you may choose to marry. Today. Any man present who would have you." The courtroom erupted. Men laughed, women whispered behind gloved hands. Evelyn's knees threatened to buckle, but she locked them, refusing to show weakness. Her eyes swept the crowd, leering faces, mocking smiles, not a single sympathetic glance among them. "I require your answer, Miss Monroe." This was madness, complete madness. Her father would never have allowed such a travesty of justice. But her father was gone, and with him, any protection she might have had. Movement in the corner caught her eye. There, in the prisoner's dock, sat a man in chains. Unlike the others, he wasn't watching her humiliation with glee. He simply sat, still as stone, his dark eyes fixed on some point beyond the courthouse walls. Luke Callahan. She knew him by reputation only. A gunslinger, a killer, bound for the territorial prison on charges of murder. His face bore the evidence of a hard life, a scar running from his left temple to his jaw, sun-weathered skin, and eyes that had seen too much death. He looked like danger itself, wrapped in human form. "Miss Monroe?" Blackwood's voice grew impatient. "Your decision?" Evelyn's mind raced. The reformatory meant certain death, slow and humiliating. Marriage to any of these townsmen meant a different kind of death, a lifetime of servitude to someone who saw her as nothing more than property. But the stranger in chains, "I choose to marry," she heard herself say. The crowd quieted, eager to see which fool would claim her. Evelyn turned, her decision crystallizing with startling clarity. She pointed directly at the prisoner's dock. "I choose him, Luke Callahan." The silence that followed was deafening. Then chaos. Women screamed, men shouted. Judge Blackwood's face turned purple, his gavel hammering uselessly against the pandemonium. "Order! Order!" he bellowed. "Miss Monroe, you cannot possibly. He is a condemned man, a murderer." "You said any man present," Evelyn replied, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "You gave no other conditions." For the first time, Luke Callahan moved. His head turned slowly, those dark eyes meeting hers across the courtroom. No surprise registered on his face, only a mild curiosity. as if she were a puzzle he hadn't expected to encounter. "This is preposterous," Blackwood sputtered. "Marshal Dixon. Surely there must be some law." Marshal Dixon, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers, shrugged. "You did say any man, judge, and technically, Callahan ain't been convicted yet, just charged." Blackwood's face contorted. He'd clearly expected Evelyn to choose from among the town's eligible bachelors, men who would keep her in line, men who answered to him. This development had not been part of his plan. "Mr. Callahan," Blackwood addressed the prisoner with obvious distaste. "Do you consent to this arrangement?" Luke Callahan stood slowly, his chains clanking. He was taller than Evelyn had realized, broad-shouldered despite his lean frame. When he spoke, his voice was low, rough as gravel. "I'm not a good man, Miss Monroe." "I'm not looking for a good man," Evelyn replied. "I'm looking for a way out of this room that doesn't involve chains of my own." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit backed into a corner. "Then I consent," he said simply. Judge Blackwood looked as if he'd swallowed a live scorpion. "Very well," he ground out. "Marshal Dixon, remove the prisoner's shackles. Reverend Pike, perform the ceremony, now." As the marshal unlocked Luke's chains, Evelyn made her way to the front of the courtroom. Her legs felt like water, but she kept moving. The crowd parted before her as if she carried plague. Reverend Pike's hands shook as he opened his Bible. "Dearly beloved." "Skip the pleasantries. Reverend," Blackwood snapped. "Get on with it." The ceremony was a mockery of everything marriage should be. No flowers, no music, no joy. Just two desperate people standing before a hostile crowd, speaking vows that meant survival rather than love. "Do you, Luke Callahan, take this woman?" "I do." "Do you, Evelyn Monroe, take this man?" "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife." Pike snapped his Bible shut. "God help you both." Judge Blackwood's voice cut through the stunned silence. "The court grants you a 3-month trial period. You will reside at the old Stewart homestead at the edge of town. If this marriage proves unsuitable, Miss Monroe, Mrs. Callahan, will be remanded to the reformatory as originally sentenced. Marshal Dixon will check on you weekly." He fixed Evelyn with a look of pure venom. "You've made your choice, girl. Now live with it." The crowd began to disperse, voices rising in scandalized whispers. Evelyn found herself standing beside her new husband, this stranger she'd bound herself to. Up close, she could see the weariness in his eyes, the way he held himself ready for violence even without his guns. "Why?" he asked quietly, meant only for her ears. "Because they expected me to break," she answered just as quietly. "And I refuse to give them the satisfaction." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Fair enough." Marshal Dixon approached with a bundle of Luke's meager possessions and a set of keys. "The Stewart place is 5 miles west. Follow the dry creek." "It ain't much, but it's shelter." He gave Luke a hard look. "You try to run, I'll hunt you down myself. You harm this woman, I'll hang you slow. Understood?" "Understood," Luke replied. They were given a wagon, barely held together with rust and prayer, and a sway-backed mare that looked like a strong wind might knock her over. Evelyn retrieved her own possessions from her father's house, under the watchful eyes of neighbors who no longer pretended to be friendly. 2 carpetbags, her mother's chest, her father's books, a lifetime reduced to what could fit in the back of a dilapidated wagon. As they rode out of town, neither spoke. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and the dust kicked up by the mare's hooves coated everything in a fine layer of grit. Evelyn kept her eyes forward, refusing to look back at the town that had betrayed her. The landscape changed as they traveled west. The neat buildings gave way to scattered shacks, then to open desert. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels against the bleached sky. Buzzards circled overhead, patient as death itself. The only sounds were the creak of wagon wheels and the occasional cry of a hawk. "You should know," Luke said suddenly. his voice barely audible over the wagon's groaning. "What you've gotten yourself into. I've killed men. More than they say I have." Evelyn's hands tightened on the wagon's bench, but she didn't flinch. "And I've just married a stranger despite a town full of hypocrites. We all make choices. Mr. Callahan." "Luke," he corrected. "Seems foolish to stand on ceremony now." "Luke, then, and I'm Evelyn." They lapsed back into silence, but it felt different now, less like two strangers forced together, more like two survivors recognizing something familiar in each other. The Stewart homestead appeared as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. It was worse than Evelyn had imagined. A single-room cabin with a leaning chimney, a collapsed fence, and a well that looked like it hadn't seen water in years. The desert had already begun reclaiming it, sand drifting against the walls, thorny ocotillo growing through gaps in the floorboards. "Home, sweet home," Luke muttered, pulling the wagon to a stop. Evelyn climbed down, her muscles protesting after hours of sitting. She surveyed their new domain with a critical eye. It would take work, endless, back-breaking work, but it was shelter. More importantly, it was 5 miles from the nearest neighbor, 5 miles from judging eyes and wagging tongues. "I can fix the fence," Luke offered, following her gaze. "The roof looks sound enough. Chimney'll need work before winter." "Assuming we last until winter," Evelyn said, then immediately regretted the defeatism in her voice. Luke gave her a look she couldn't quite decipher. "You chose this, remember? Man like me over the reformatory. Must mean you've got some fight in you, or I'm a fool." Maybe both. For the first time, the ghost of a smile touched his lips. But fools sometimes survive when wise men don't. They unloaded their possessions in silence as the sun painted the desert in shades of blood and gold. The cabin's interior was thick with dust and cobwebs, but structurally sound. A cast-iron stove dominated one corner, a narrow bed another. A rough-hewn table and 2 chairs completed the furnishings. As darkness fell, they stood awkwardly in the small space, the reality of their situation settling like dust on their shoulders. They were married, strangers bound by law and desperation, expected to share this tiny cabin, this narrow bed, this uncertain future. "I'll sleep outside," Luke said, already moving toward the door. "Until you're comfortable with arrangements." Evelyn wanted to protest. The nights were cold in the desert, and there were scorpions and snakes to consider. But the relief must have shown on her face because he nodded and grabbed a blanket. "There's a revolver in my pack," he said from the doorway. "Loaded. You know how to use it?" "My father taught me." "Good. Bar the door behind me." Then he was gone, leaving Evelyn alone in the cabin that smelled of dust and abandonment. She sank onto the narrow bed, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of what she'd done. In a single afternoon, she'd lost everything: her home, her reputation, her freedom. She'd traded it all for this ramshackle cabin and a husband who was more stranger than savior. But as she lay in the darkness, listening to the alien sounds of the desert night, coyotes howling, wind whistling through gaps in the walls, the distant hoot of an owl, she felt something she hadn't expected. Not regret, relief. For the first time in 3 weeks, she wasn't surrounded by people who whispered about her father's death, who questioned why a respected judge would die so suddenly, who looked at her with suspicion and false pity. Here, in this desolate place with a man who'd admitted to killing, she felt paradoxically safer than she had in town. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The desert was unforgiving, their situation precarious, their future uncertain. But tonight, for just this moment, Evelyn Monroe Callahan allowed herself to close her eyes and rest. Outside, Luke sat with his back against the cabin wall, watching the stars wheel overhead. He'd meant what he said. He wasn't a good man, but perhaps in this godforsaken place at the edge of nowhere, being good mattered less than being useful. And if nothing else, he could be useful to the woman who'd chosen him over certain doom. It wasn't redemption. Men like him didn't get redemption. But it was purpose, and that was more than he'd had in years. The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of creosote and sage. Somewhere in the darkness, a screech owl called. its cry like a woman's scream. Luke pulled the blanket tighter and settled in for a long night, guarding the stranger who was now his wife. The first week passed in a blur of sweat and silence. Evelyn woke each dawn to find Luke already gone, the blanket he used folded neatly by the door. She'd hear him working, the rhythmic thud of hammer on wood, the scrape of a shovel, the occasional curse when something didn't cooperate. By the time she emerged, dressed and ready to face another day, he'd have water drawn from the well and a fire started in the stove. They moved around each other like wary animals sharing territory. Luke worked on the fence, the chicken coop, the gaps in the cabin walls. Evelyn threw herself into making the place livable, scrubbing years of grime from the floorboards, beating dust from the thin mattress, organizing their meager supplies. They spoke only when necessary. Pass the hammer. Water's boiling. Storm coming. The desert was teaching Evelyn lessons she'd never wanted to learn. How to conserve water when every drop had to be hauled up from a well that seemed to reach halfway to hell. How to cook over a temperamental stove that belched smoke at the slightest provocation. How to shake out her boots every morning, checking for scorpions that sought shelter in the dark leather. On the 6th night, she burned their supper. Again. The beans turned to charcoal while she struggled with the firewood, and the smell of scorched food filled the cabin. She stood over the ruined pot, exhaustion and frustration finally overwhelming her careful control. "It's just beans," Luke said from the doorway. She hadn't heard him come in. "It's not just beans," she snapped, then immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry, I can't even manage a simple meal. What use am I out here?" Luke moved past her to the stove, his movements careful and deliberate. He scraped the burned mess into a bucket, set the pot to soak, and pulled out a tin of crackers and some dried meat. "First week I was on my own. I nearly poisoned myself trying to cook prickly pear," he said, dividing the simple food between 2 plates. "Didn't know you had to burn the spines off first. Spent 3 days with my mouth swollen shut, living on water and rage." Despite herself, Evelyn felt her lips twitch. "Really? Ask any desert rat. We've all got stories of nearly dying from our own stupidity." He pushed a plate toward her. "You're doing fine." They ate in companionable silence, and, for the first time, Evelyn didn't feel the need to fill it with words. The second week brought new challenges. The monsoons that sometimes blessed the desert in late summer held off, leaving the land parched and unforgiving. The well water turned brackish, barely drinkable. The heat pressed down like a physical weight, making every movement an effort. Evelyn was struggling with an armload of firewood when she heard it, a sound that made her blood turn to ice. The distinctive rattle, like dried beans in a gourd, coming from near her feet. "Don't move." Luke's voice was calm, controlled, but she heard the underlying tension. The rattlesnake was coiled not 3 feet away, its flat head raised, forked tongue tasting the air. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs, every instinct screaming at her to run. "When I say, step back slowly," Luke instructed, moving into her peripheral vision. "Don't jerk, just ease back. Ready, now." She took one careful step backward. The snake's rattle intensified. Another step. The wood in her arms trembled. The snake struck. Luke's gun cleared leather faster than thought, the shot splitting the desert silence. The snake's head disappeared in a spray of blood and dust, its body thrashing in death throes. Evelyn's knees gave out. The firewood scattered as she sank to the ground, shaking. Luke knelt beside her, his hands hovering near her boots. "Did it get you, Evelyn? Did it bite you?" "No," she managed. "No, I don't think—" His hands were already checking, running over her boots, her skirt hem, looking for puncture marks. The clinical touch shouldn't have affected her, but the careful way he handled her, the focused concern in his eyes, made something tight in her chest loosen. "You're all right," he said, rocking back on his heels. "But we need to be more careful. Always check the wood pile. Always watch where you step. The desert doesn't forgive carelessness." That night, he didn't immediately retreat outside after supper. Instead, he showed her how to make snakebite marks on her boots, small notches that would remind her to check her surroundings. As he worked, he talked more than he had in 2 weeks, telling her about the desert's dangers, which plants held water, which would poison you, how to read the sky for weather, how to find shelter in a sandstorm. "Why didn't you leave?" Evelyn asked suddenly. "When the judge gave you the chance to refuse. Why didn't you?" Luke's hand stilled on her boot. "Prison's just a slower death than hanging, at least this way." He shrugged. "Maybe I do one decent thing before my past catches up." "What past?" He handed her the boot and stood. "The kind that always catches up." But he didn't go outside that night. Instead, he made a pallet near the door, still giving her space, but inside, protected from the elements. Evelyn lay in the narrow bed, listening to his breathing slowly even out, and wondered why that small change felt so significant. The 3rd week brought the snake bite. Evelyn had grown careless, lulled by routine. She reached for the water bucket without looking, felt the sharp sting, and jerked back to see a small rattler disappearing through a gap in the wall. 2 perfect puncture marks welled blood on her forearm. "Luke!" The word came out as a gasp. He burst through the door, took in the situation in a glance, and moved with the same deadly efficiency he'd shown with the other snake. But this time, his target was already gone, and the damage was done. "Sit," he ordered, guiding her to the bed. His knife was already out, the blade gleaming in the lamplight. "This is going to hurt." He cut the wound, quick and clean. Then his mouth was on her arm, drawing out the venom, spitting it aside, again and again, while Evelyn gritted her teeth against the pain and the strange intimacy of his lips on her skin. "We need to get you to town," he said between draws. "Doc Morrison." "No." The word came out fiercer than she intended. "I won't give them the satisfaction. I won't prove them right." "Evelyn, this isn't about pride. You could die." "Then I die." She met his eyes, seeing her own stubbornness reflected there. "But I won't crawl back to them." He stared at her for a long moment, then resumed his work with renewed determination. When he'd done all he could, he bound the wound and settled beside the bed. "You're a fool," he said, but there was something like admiration in his voice. "Pot, meet kettle." She managed, already feeling the fever starting. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of heat and chills. Evelyn drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of Luke's constant presence, cool cloths on her burning skin, strong hands holding her head while she sipped water, a low voice talking her through the worst of it, telling stories of nothing, wild horses he'd seen, towns he'd passed through, anything to keep her anchored. In her delirium, she dreamed of her father's death, saw again his face, twisted in pain, reaching for something, someone who wasn't there, heard voices in the hall, low and urgent, felt hands searching through papers, looking for something. "They killed him," she mumbled, lost in fever dreams. "They killed him, and I couldn't stop them." "Shh," Luke's voice pulling her back. "You're safe. I've got you." His hand found hers in the darkness, rough fingers intertwining with her smaller ones. She held on like he was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. When the fever finally broke, she woke to find him asleep in the chair beside the bed, their hands still linked. His face, unguarded in sleep, looked younger. The harsh lines softened. She studied him in the pale dawn light, the scar that carved through his stubble, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his other hand rested near his gun even in sleep. He stirred, eyes opening to find her watching. For a moment, neither moved. Then he carefully extracted his hand, standing and stretching out the kinks from sleeping upright. "You need food," he said gruffly. "I'll heat some broth." But Evelyn caught his sleeve. "Thank you." He looked down at her hand on his arm, then back at her face. "You would have done the same." "Would I?" "Yes," he said with such certainty it took her breath away. "You chose a condemned man over safety. You stayed when you could have run. You're not the soft town girl you pretend to be." He fixed the broth, fed it to her when her hands shook too much to hold the spoon. As she ate, He told her about the improvements he'd made while she was ill. New boards over the gaps where snakes could enter. A better latch for the door. A rain barrel to catch water when the storms finally came. That evening, as the sun painted the desert in shades of amber and rose, Luke surprised her by bringing out a battered harmonica. The melody that drifted across the cooling air was mournful and sweet, a song of loss and longing that seemed to capture everything they couldn't say. "My wife loved music," he said when the last note faded. It was the first time he'd mentioned her. "Sarah, she used to sing while she worked, had a voice like honey and whiskey." Evelyn waited, sensing the weight of untold story. "They came while I was driving cattle to Tucson, border raiders, looking for easy prey." His voice was flat, emotionless, but his knuckles were white around the harmonica. "Found the cabin burned. Her and the boy." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I tracked them to Mexico, killed them all, every last one, then kept killing because it was the only thing that made the hurting stop. Luke, the man they want me for, the one in Tombstone, he drew first, but nobody saw that part, just saw Luke Callahan gun down another's soul." He laughed bitterly. "Truth is, I've killed so many. What's one more mark on my soul?" Evelyn pushed herself upright, ignoring the residual weakness. "You saved my life. That counts for something. Does it? Or am I just postponing the inevitable?" She didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence as darkness crept across the desert, each lost in their own thoughts of death and redemption, guilt and survival. That night, when Luke started to head for his usual pallet, Evelyn stopped him. "The bed's big enough for two," she said, then added quickly, "just for sleeping. It's foolish for you to be on the floor when—" "All right," he said, cutting off her nervous rambling. They lay side by side in the darkness, careful not to touch, a gulf of unspoken things between them. But when Evelyn woke in the small hours, shivering despite the warm night, she found herself pressed against his side, his arm around her shoulders. She should have pulled away, maintained the boundaries that kept them safe from whatever this was becoming. Instead, she closed her eyes and let herself rest against the solid warmth of him, listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong, the rhythm of a man who'd survived everything the world could throw at him and kept going anyway. In the morning, they didn't speak of it, but something had shifted in the night. Some invisible line crossed. They still moved carefully around each other, but now their movements included small touches, a hand on a shoulder when passing, fingers brushing when sharing tools, a palm against a back when steadying balance. The desert watched and waited, patient as always. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising either blessed rain or devastating floods. In the distance, a hawk cried, wheeling against the harsh blue sky. And in a cabin at the edge of nowhere, two damaged souls began the slow, painful process of learning to trust. The question came on a morning when the desert sky hung heavy with unshed rain. They were working side by side, Evelyn tending the small vegetable garden they'd coaxed from the unforgiving soil, Luke repairing the chicken coop that housed their 3 scrawny hens. "Who's Sarah?" Luke's hammer stopped mid-swing. Evelyn kept her eyes on the tomato plants, giving him space to answer or deflect. "You said her name," she continued quietly. "When you were tending my fever, you called me Sarah." The silence stretched taut between them. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the air tasted of copper and dust. "My wife," his voice came out rough. "I told you she died. You told me she was murdered. That's not the same as telling me who she was." Luke set down the hammer, his movements deliberate. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Nothing." Evelyn finally looked up, meeting his guarded gaze. "Whatever you need to tell." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, like drawing poison from a wound, he began to speak. "Met her in Sonora. I was 19, full of piss and vinegar, thought I knew everything about the world." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "She was washing clothes by the river. Threw a wet shirt at my head when I tried to sweet-talk her. Should have known then she was too good for me." Evelyn settled back on her heels, listening. Her father ran sheep, didn't much care for the gringo cowboy sniffing around his daughter. But Sarah, he shook his head. Sarah did what she wanted, always did. We married against his wishes, moved north, built a cabin not much better than this one. Had a boy, called him Thomas, after my father. His hands clenched and unclenched. They were my whole world. Evelyn. Everything I did was for them. Every drive, every job. Every sunrise was about making a life they could be proud of. And then, you don't have to, August 15th, 1878. The date came out like bullets. Remember it because it was Thomas's birthday. He'd have been 5. I'd promised to be back with presents. A wooden horse, ribbon for Sarah's hair. Found them 3 days later. What was left of them. Evelyn's throat tightened. She wanted to reach for him, but didn't know if touch would comfort or shatter. After that, nothing mattered. Tracked the raiders, killed them, kept killing, hired my gun out to anyone who'd pay, hoping someday I'd be slow enough to catch a bullet. He laughed bitterly. Turns out I'm too damn mean to die easy. You're not mean, Evelyn said softly. You're grieving. That what you call it when a man's got 17 notches on his gun? I call it surviving the only way you knew how. Luke looked at her then. Really looked at her. As if seeing past the proper judge's daughter to something else entirely. What about you? You talk in your sleep, too. You know, they killed him. Your father? Evelyn's hand stilled on the tomato leaves. She'd known this moment would come, when the trading of secrets would demand her own currency. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe. He was healthy as a horse one day, dead the next. Heart failure, Doc Morrison said, but the night he died, I heard voices, arguing. When I went to his study the next morning, his papers were scattered. Some missing. His safe was open. Empty. She pulled a withered leaf from the plant with unnecessary force. He'd been investigating something. Land deeds, he said. Wouldn't tell me more. Said it was too dangerous. You think someone killed him for it? I think Judge Blackwood had him killed. The words came out in a rush. They were old rivals, and Blackwood had been pushing for those land deals along the new rail line. Papa opposed him at every turn. With him gone, Blackwood gets his way, Luke finished, and gets rid of you as a bonus. Sending me to the reformatory would have been tidier, but I suppose making me a pariah works just as well. Thunder cracked closer now, and the first fat raindrops splattered in the dust. They scrambled to secure tools and get inside before the deluge hit. The rain came in sheets, drumming on the roof, turning the desert into a rushing maze of temporary rivers. They stood at the window, watching the storm transform the landscape. The proximity, the electricity in the air, the shared confessions, it all created a tension that crackled between them like lightning. I should check the roof for leaks, Luke said, but didn't move. It's held this long. Evelyn replied, equally still. The space between them seemed to shrink without either moving. Evelyn was acutely aware of everything. The way his shirt clung to his shoulders, still damp from the first raindrops. The way his jaw clenched and unclenched. The heat radiating from his body, mere inches from hers. Evelyn. Her name came out like a warning. I'm not her, she said quietly. I'm not Sarah. I know that. No, he agreed, finally turning to face her. You're not. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to step back. Instead, she leaned into his palm as it cupped her cheek, rough calluses against soft skin. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she saw the war in his eyes, want battling with guilt, need fighting against fear. She made the choice for both of them, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. For a moment, he froze. Then his control shattered like glass. His arms came around her, crushing her against him as he deepened the kiss. It was nothing like the chaste pecs she'd witnessed at town sociables. This was hunger and desperation, loneliness seeking its echo in another soul. When they broke apart, both breathing hard. Luke stepped back as if burned. We can't, he said hoarsely. I can't. Shame flooded through her. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. No. He caught her hand before she could retreat. It's not you. Christ, Evelyn, you have to know it's not you, but I've got nothing to offer, no future, no promises. Just a target on my back and blood on my hands. I'm not asking for promises, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. I'm asking for now, just now. He searched her face, looking for what? She didn't know. Then, with a sound that might have been surrender or prayer, he pulled her back into his arms. This time the kiss was slower, deeper, tinged with something that might have been hope. The storm raged outside, but inside the small cabin, there was only the sound of breathing and the rustle of fabric as they held each other. When they finally pulled apart, Luke rested his forehead against hers. You're going to be the death of me, woman. Better than a bullet? She whispered back, and felt him smile against her hair. They didn't take it further that night. Instead, they sat close on the narrow bed, talking as the storm spent itself outside. Luke told her about his childhood on a hardscrabble ranch in Texas, about learning to shoot before he could properly write his name. Evelyn shared memories of her mother, who died when she was 12, leaving her to navigate her father's expectations alone. He wanted me to marry well, she said, fingers tracing patterns on Luke's arm. The mayor's son courted me for a while, Frederick Ashford. Had soft hands and softer words, promised me a big house and social standing. What happened? I laughed when he proposed. She smiled ruefully. Poor Frederick. He meant well, but the thought of spending my life pouring tea and planning charity bazaars, I'd rather face rattlesnakes. Got your wish there, Luke said dryly. She nudged him with her elbow. At least rattlesnakes are honest about what they are. The rain tapered off as night deepened, leaving the desert washed clean and smelling of creosote. They lay down fully clothed on top of the blanket, maintaining a careful distance that lasted all of an hour before Evelyn found herself curled against Luke's side, his arm around her shoulders. What happens when the 3 months are up? She asked into the darkness. Luke was quiet for a long moment. Don't know. Blackwood expects this to fail, expects you to come crawling back, begging for mercy. He'll be waiting a long time. What if I'm gone by then? Prison or a grave? Makes no difference. What'll you do? Evelyn considered this. 3 weeks ago, the thought would have terrified her. Now, I'll survive, she said simply. I'll take the skills you've taught me and make a life somewhere else, maybe California. I hear they're less particular about a woman's past out there. You'd leave everything behind. Your father's name, your history. My father's name didn't protect me when I needed it. And history is just stories people tell themselves to feel important. She turned in his arms to look at him. What about you? If Blackwood's scheme fails, if they don't come for you, what then? Then I wake up every morning surprised to still be breathing, he said honestly. Been living that way for 3 years. Don't know how to do different anymore. You could learn. Could I? His hand found her face in the darkness, thumb tracing her jaw. Some things broken don't mend right. Evelyn, you should know that before. Before what? Instead of answering, he kissed her, soft and slow and sad. Like a goodbye neither was ready to say. When he pulled back, Evelyn felt the loss like a physical ache. Sleep, he murmured. Dawn comes early. But sleep was elusive with the weight of unfinished business between them. Evelyn lay awake, feeling the rise and fall of his chest, wondering if 3 months would be enough time to convince him that broken things could still be beautiful, still be worth saving. Outside, the desert began its night songs, coyotes calling to their scattered pack, owls hunting in the darkness, the whisper of wind through wet sage. Inside, 2 souls circled each other like binary stars, drawn together by gravity but held apart by the ghosts of who they used to be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Marshal Dixon was due for his weekly check, and the knowing looks he gave them made Evelyn's skin crawl. The townspeople were no doubt placing bets on when she'd break. when the refined judge's daughter would come running back to civilization. They didn't know her at all. She thought of her father's study, those missing papers, Blackwood's satisfied smile at her sentencing. There were secrets buried in this desert, truths that someone had killed to keep hidden, and maybe, just maybe, a condemned man and a ruined woman were exactly the right people to dig them up. Luke shifted beside her, murmuring something unintelligible. Without waking, his arm tightened around her, pulling her closer. For now, this was enough, this fragile peace, this tentative trust, this space they'd carved out at the edge of the world where broken things could rest. The storm had passed, leaving stars scattered across the sky like spilled diamonds. Through the window, Evelyn could see the Big Dipper tilting toward dawn. Time was passing, their 3 months ticking away like blood from a wound. But tonight, in this moment, with the taste of rain on the air and Luke's heartbeat steady under her palm, Evelyn Monroe Callahan allowed herself to believe in the possibility of tomorrow. The morning after their first kiss dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had washed the world clean. Evelyn woke to find Luke already up, standing shirtless at the wash basin, razor in hand. She watched through half-closed eyes as he scraped away several days of stubble, revealing the sharp lines of his jaw. "Planning to look presentable for Marshal Dixon?" she asked, voice still rough with sleep. He glanced at her in the small mirror. "Man ought to shave once in a while. Keeps him civilized." There was something different about him this morning, a lightness she hadn't seen before. It made him look younger, less like the dangerous gunslinger who'd stood in chains in that courthouse. "I prefer you a little uncivilized," she said before she could stop herself. His hand stilled for a moment, then resumed its steady strokes. "Careful what you wish for, Mrs. Callahan." The use of her married name sent an unexpected shiver through her. They'd been married nearly a month, but it was the first time he'd called her that without irony or distance. After breakfast, during which they kept catching each other's eyes and looking away, Luke surprised her by pulling out a worn deck of cards. "Thought you might want to learn," he said, shuffling with practiced ease. "Poker's a useful skill. Never know when you might need to bluff your way out of trouble. Is that how you've survived so long? Bluffing? Sometimes, other times." He dealt the cards with quick, efficient movements. "Other times you need to know when to show your hand." They played through the morning, Luke teaching her the tells that gave away a player's intentions, the twitch of an eye, the tap of a finger, the way someone's breathing changed when they held a good hand. Evelyn proved a quick study, winning 3 hands in a row before Luke called her on it. "You're cheating," he said, but there was admiration in his voice. "I'm adapting your lessons to my advantage," she corrected primly, then ruined the effect by grinning. "You said to watch for patterns. You always scratch your jaw when you're bluffing." "Do I now?" He leaned back, studying her with new interest. "What else have you noticed? You sleep on your right side, but keep your gun hand free. You test the wind every morning before deciding which direction to patrol. You hum when you're content, usually that old cavalry tune." She paused, heat rising in her cheeks. "And you watch me when you think I'm not looking." "Guilty," he admitted without shame. Hard not to watch something beautiful in all this ugliness. The compliment hung between them, unexpected and sincere. Before either could address it, the sound of approaching hoofbeats broke the spell. "Dixon," Luke said, already reaching for his gun belt. Earlier than usual, but it wasn't Marshal Dixon who appeared at their door. Instead, 3 riders approached, rough men with hard faces and weapons worn loose for easy drawing. Luke stepped outside, positioning himself between them and the cabin. "Help you, gentlemen?" His voice carried that particular brand of politeness that suggested violence barely leashed. The lead rider, a man with tobacco-stained teeth and mean eyes, spat into the dust. "Come to see the woman who'd marry a killer. Heard she was something special." "You heard wrong," Luke said evenly. "Nothing special here, just folks trying to live quiet." "That so?" The man's gaze slid past Luke to where Evelyn stood in the doorway. "Seems a waste, Pretty thing like that, warming the bed of a dead man walking. Maybe she'd like some company that'll last longer than a rope. Luke's hand didn't move toward his gun, but something in his stance shifted. The very air seemed to grow colder. "You boys should move along," he said, each word precise as a blade. "While you still can." The third man, younger and clearly drunk, laughed. "You gonna take all three of us? Callahan, your reputation ain't that good. Want to find out?" Evelyn had never heard that tone from him before. Flat, empty, like looking into an abyss. She understood then why men feared Luke Callahan. Not because he was fast with a gun, but because he truly didn't care if he lived or died. It made him the most dangerous kind of opponent. The leader seemed to recognize it too. His bravado faltered, hand twitching near his pistol but not quite committed to the draw. "Just being neighborly," he said, trying to salvage some dignity. "Woman ought to know she's got options when her man swings." "She knows her options," Evelyn said, stepping fully into view. The shotgun in her hands was steady, aimed at the leader's chest, and right now, her option is to give you 10 seconds to get off our land. The men exchanged glances, calculating odds. 3 against 2, but one was Luke Callahan, and the woman held that scattergun like she knew how to use it. "This ain't over," the leader warned. But he was already turning his horse. They watched until the riders disappeared into the heat shimmer. Then Luke gently took the shotgun from Evelyn's white-knuckled grip. "You did good," he said quietly. "But next time, stay inside. Let me handle—" "No." The word came out sharp as a slap. "I'm not Sarah. Luke, I'm not going to hide inside while you face danger alone. We're partners or we're nothing." He looked like she'd hit him. "Evelyn, those men came here because they see me as your weakness, your liability." She met his gaze squarely. "Teach me to be neither." For a long moment, he studied her face. Then he nodded once, decisive. "All right, but if I'm teaching you to shoot proper, you follow my rules. No arguments, no shortcuts." Agreed. The rest of the day became an intensive lesson in firearms. Luke set up targets, bottles and cans at varying distances, and taught her how to really handle a gun. Not just point and shoot, but how to breathe, how to squeeze rather than pull, how to compensate for wind and distance. "You're anticipating the recoil," he said, standing behind her, adjusting her stance. "Let it surprise you. Trust the weapon." His hands on her arms, positioning them correctly, made concentration difficult. She was acutely aware of his chest against her back, his breath warm on her neck. "Focus," he murmured, but his voice had gone rough. She fired, hitting the bottle dead center. The satisfaction was immediate and intense. "Good. Again." They practiced until her arms ached and the sun hung low in the sky. By the end, she could hit 7 out of 10 targets at 50 yards. Respectable for anyone. Remarkable for a woman who'd never held anything more dangerous than an embroidery needle a month ago. "You're a natural," Luke said as they cleaned the weapons. "Your father teach you anything about shooting?" He believed a lady should be accomplished in all things. Evelyn said wryly. "Music, languages, literature, and apparently murder." "It's not murder when you're protecting what's yours." "And what exactly is mine to protect?" The question came out more loaded than she'd intended. Luke's hands stilled on the rifle he was cleaning. "This place, your life, your future." "What about you?" she asked quietly. "Are you mine to protect?" He set the rifle aside and moved to where she sat, crouching so they were eye level. "I'm not worth protecting, Evelyn. But if it keeps you fighting, keeps you strong." He cupped her face with one hand. "Then yes, I'm yours." She turned her face into his palm, pressing a kiss to the calluses there. "Then stop trying to die for me and start trying to live with me." He pulled her to him then, kissing her with a desperation that spoke of all the tomorrows they might not have. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how," he admitted. "I've been a ghost so long, I don't remember being anything else." "Then we'll figure it out together," she promised, "one day at a time." That night, when they lay down together. Some invisible barrier had been crossed. Luke held her like she was something precious, something that might shatter or disappear if he loosened his grip. They didn't make love, not yet, but the intimacy of simply being held, of feeling safe in another's arms, was almost more profound. "Tell me about the future," Luke said into the darkness. "The one you see for yourself." Evelyn considered. A month ago. She couldn't have imagined any future beyond the next society event, the next suitable suitor. Now, a place of our own, she said slowly. "Not just surviving, but thriving. Maybe raise horses. You're good with them. I could teach school, or take in sewing. We could build something real." "Where?" "Anywhere they don't know our names. California. Maybe Oregon. Somewhere the past can't follow." Luke was quiet for so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, "I'd like that, to be nobody special. Just a man with a wife and a chance to do better." "You're already doing better," she pointed out. "Every day you choose to try, you're doing better." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "When did you get so wise?" "Somewhere between the snake bite and learning to shoot bottles at 50 yards. His chest rumbled with quiet laughter, a sound she was hearing more often, one she was becoming addicted to. "Those men today," he said after a moment. "They'll be back, probably with more. Then we'll be ready." "It's not that simple. Men like that, they don't like being shown up, especially not by a woman." His arm tightened around her. "They'll come at night, when they think we're vulnerable. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to prepare you. There's a difference." Evelyn turned in his arms to face him, though she could barely make out his features in the darkness. "Then prepare me. Teach me everything I need to know. Not just shooting, but tactics, strategy, how to think like they think. You don't want that in your head. Trust me, I want to survive," she said firmly. "More than that, I want us to survive, both of us, together, whatever that takes." Luke traced her face in the darkness, fingers memorizing the curve of her cheek, the line of her jaw. "You're nothing like I expected, Mrs. Callahan?" Disappointed? Terrified. He admitted, "You make me want things I've got no business wanting." "Such as?" "Tomorrow," he said simply. "And the day after that, and the one after that. You make me greedy for time I might not have." "Then we'd better make the most of what we do have," she whispered, and kissed him. This kiss was different, slower, deeper, full of promise rather than desperation. When it ended, they were both trembling with restraint. "Not yet," Luke said hoarsely. I want it to be right, not because we're scared or lonely or running out of time, but because we choose it, clear-eyed and certain." Evelyn nodded against his chest, understanding even as her body ached for more. They had been forced together by circumstance, but what grew between them now was choice, deliberate and conscious. That deserved to be honored. Outside, a screech owl called, its cry echoing across the desert. Inside, two people held each other against the darkness, building a foundation one careful stone at a time. Tomorrow would bring new threats. Marshal Dixon's visit, the promised return of the riders, the ever-present specter of Luke's past catching up. But tonight, they had this, shared warmth, quiet breathing, the solid promise of another presence in the darkness. It wasn't much by the world's standards, but here at the edge of nowhere, it felt like everything. Marshal Dixon arrived the next morning with news that changed everything. "Bounty's gone up," he said without preamble, accepting the cup of coffee Evelyn offered. $300, dead or alive. Luke's expression didn't change, but Evelyn saw his knuckles whiten where he gripped his own cup. "Who posted it?" "That's the interesting part." Dixon's weathered face was grim. "Weren't the territorial government, private bounty, paid through a lawyer in Tucson. Someone wants you bad." "Callahan." "Any idea who?" "Could be anyone you've crossed. Could be someone who stands to gain from you being gone." Dixon's eyes flicked to Evelyn. "Could be someone who doesn't like the current arrangement." The implication hung heavy in the air. Evelyn set down her cup with deliberate calm. You think Judge Blackwood is behind this? Didn't say that. Dixon pulled out a folded paper. But I did some digging after our last visit. Seems your father was investigating more than land deeds. Mrs. Callahan found this in his effects at the courthouse. Evelyn took the paper with trembling hands. It was a page from her father's journal, his precise handwriting documenting suspicious transactions, names, dates. At the bottom, circled 3 times, Railway Consortium, Blackwood, murder. Where did you find this? She breathed. Hidden in a law book. Blackwood's men must have missed it when they searched his office. Dixon leaned back. Your father was building a case. Near as I can figure, Blackwood and his associates have been killing homesteaders, making it look like Apache raids or bandits. Then they buy the land cheap from desperate widows or the territorial government. The railway, Luke said quietly. They're clearing the path for the railway. That's my thinking. Dixon stood, adjusting his gun belt. Which means you two are sitting on prime real estate. This old Stewart place may look like nothing, but it's right where they'd want to run the southern spur. So they forced me into marriage with a condemned man. Wait for him to hang or get shot. Then... Evelyn couldn't finish. Then the grieving widow sells cheap and disappears. Dixon headed for the door, then paused. Watch yourselves. That bounty's gonna bring every gun in the territory sniffing around. And Blackwood, he's not a patient man. After Dixon left, Evelyn found herself pacing the small cabin like a caged animal. We have to leave. Tonight? Head for Mexico or... No. Luke's voice was firm. We run now. We'll be running forever. And they'll still come after you. Better than watching you die. He caught her shoulders, stilling her frantic movement. Look at me. I'm not dead yet, and I don't plan on making it easy for them. Luke, you can't fight every bounty hunter in Arizona. Don't have to. Just have to make it not worth their while. His thumb stroked along her collarbones, soothing. Besides, we've got something they don't expect. What's that? Proof of murder, your father's journal, Dixon's support. We can fight back. Evelyn wanted to believe him, but the fear was a living thing in her chest. I can't lose you, she whispered. Not when I've just found you. He pulled her close, and she breathed in the scent of him, leather and soap and that indefinable something that was purely Luke. You're not going to lose me. I'm too mean to die easy. Remember? That night, they prepared. Luke cleaned and loaded every weapon they had, taught Evelyn how to reload quickly in the dark. They moved furniture to provide cover if shooting started inside, stored water and ammunition in strategic places. If they come, he instructed, you take the northwest corner. Good cover, clear line of sight to both doors. We'll stand together. She interrupted. Whatever comes. He looked like he wanted to argue, then nodded. Together, then. They worked until well past midnight, finally collapsing into bed exhausted. This time, when Luke pulled her close, there was no hesitation. Evelyn turned in his arms, finding his mouth in the darkness. I want to be with you, she said against his lips. Completely. Not in case. He kissed her deeply, then pulled back. When we make love, it won't be because we're afraid. It'll be because we want to celebrate living, not prepare for dying. How can you be so calm? Because I've been living on borrowed time for 3 years. Every sunrise is a gift I didn't expect. His hand found her face in the darkness. You gave me a reason to want more sunrises. That's already more than I had. They kissed again, slow and thorough, hands mapping the territory of each other through fabric, when they finally settled to sleep. Evelyn felt the change between them, deeper than desire, stronger than fear. This was partnership, chosen and cherished. She woke to Luke's hand over her mouth and his voice in her ear. Riders, 3, maybe 4, coming slow. Instantly alert, she slipped from bed and grabbed the rifle he'd left for her. Through the window, she could see shadows moving in the pre-dawn darkness. Not the direct approach of honest men, but the skulking movement of predators. Bounty hunters? She breathed. Most like. Luke checked his pistols. Movements economical and practiced. Remember what I taught you? Stay calm. Pick your targets. Make every shot count. The attack came with the first pale light of dawn. The crack of rifle fire shattered the desert silence. Splinters exploding from the doorframe. Evelyn ducked, heart hammering, then rose and fired through the window. Her shot went wide, but it made the attackers dive for cover. "That's my girl," Luke muttered. Then he was moving, fluid as smoke, firing from different windows to make it seem like more defenders. The battle was brief, but vicious. Evelyn's world narrowed to the kick of the rifle, the acrid smell of gunpowder, the need to protect what was theirs. When one attacker tried to rush the door, she shot him in the leg, sending him screaming back to cover. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The remaining attackers retreated, dragging their wounded companion, apparently deciding $300 wasn't worth dying for. "You all right?" Luke was beside her immediately, hands checking for injury. "I'm fine. The shaking hit her all at once. She'd shot a man, not killed him, but still, the reality of violence, so different from target practice, left her nauseated. "Hey," Luke gathered her close. "You did what you had to. You protected us. Will they come back?" "Not those three. Word'll spread that we're not easy pickings." He kissed her temple. "You were magnificent. Remind me never to make you angry." "Despite everything." She laughed, a shaky sound but genuine. "I was terrified." "So was I. Difference is, you didn't let it stop you." They spent the morning repairing damage and trying to return to normal, but Evelyn couldn't stop jumping at shadows. When Luke suggested they go to town for supplies, she almost refused. But they needed ammunition, food, and most importantly, information. The ride to Perdition Creek was tense, both of them scanning the horizon for threats. But the town, when they reached it, seemed almost sleepy in the afternoon heat, until they noticed the way conversations stopped when they passed, the way eyes tracked their movement. At the general store, Mrs. Hartwell served them with pinched lips and averted eyes. As Evelyn paid for their purchases, the woman leaned in. "You should know," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Judge Blackwood's brought in a specialist, a man named Josiah Crane. They say he's killed 20 men, never misses." Evelyn's blood chilled. "When?" "Arrived this morning on the stage. He's at the Oriental now, drinking and asking questions about your husband." Outside, Evelyn relayed the warning to Luke. His face went carefully blank. The expression she'd learned meant he was thinking rapidly, calculating odds. "Crane," he said quietly. "I know him. Worked a job together in Colorado 5 years back." "Is he as dangerous as they say?" "More. He's smart, patient, won't come at us wild like those others." Luke helped her into the wagon. "We need to—" "Luke Callahan." The voice came from behind them, smooth as aged whiskey. They turned to find a man standing in the street, tall, well-dressed, with pale eyes that seemed to look through rather than at them. "Josiah," Luke said evenly. "Been a while?" "Indeed." Crane's gaze shifted to Evelyn, and she fought the urge to shudder. "And this must be the bride. Quite a stir you've caused. Ma'am." "Mr. Crane." She was proud that her voice didn't shake. "If you've come for the bounty, I've come for a conversation." Crane smiled, and it was worse than a scowl would have been. "With your husband. Alone. The Oriental. 1 hour." "I don't think—" Evelyn began. "It's all right." Luke cut in. 1 hour. Crane touched his hat brim and strolled away, every line of his body radiating confidence. "You can't meet him," Evelyn said as soon as they were moving. "It's a trap. Maybe, maybe not. Josiah's particular about how he works. If he wanted me dead, I'd already be bleeding. Then what does he want? That's what I need to find out." Luke's jaw was tight. "I need you to stay at the boarding house." "Mrs. Chen runs it? She's discreet. If I'm not back in 2 hours—" "I'm not hiding while you face him alone." "Evelyn." "No." She grabbed his arm. "We're partners, remember? Together or not at all." He pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face her fully. "This isn't about partnership. This is about keeping you alive. Crane doesn't leave witnesses, doesn't care about innocent bystanders. If this goes bad, then we face it together," she said firmly. "I won't be Sarah. Luke, I won't be the woman waiting at home while you die." The name of his dead wife hit him like a physical blow. "That's not fair. None of this is fair." She touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. "But it's what we have. Don't shut me out now." He caught her hand, pressing it flat against his cheek. "You terrify me," he admitted. "The thought of you in danger is exactly how I feel about you walking into that saloon." She leaned close. "Let me watch your back, please." For a long moment, he was silent. Then, "You stay outside. First sign of trouble, you run. Promise me." "I promise to use my judgment," she said, which wasn't the same thing at all. But it was all the compromise she'd give, and he knew it. They made their way to the Oriental, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the dusty street. Evelyn took position across from the saloon, rifle hidden beneath a serape, trying to look like she was simply resting in the shade. Luke paused at the saloon doors, looking back at her once. Then he pushed through, disappearing into the smoky interior. The minutes crawled by. Evelyn counted heartbeats, watching the doors, the windows, the roof. Every nerve stretched taut, waiting for the gunshot that would shatter her world. Instead, Luke emerged 40 minutes later, whole and apparently unharmed. Crane followed, stopping on the boardwalk to light a cigar. "Mrs. Callahan," he called out, though she'd thought herself well hidden. "Your husband is a fortunate man. Don't make him a fool by getting yourself killed on his account." Then he walked away, leaving them standing in the dusty street. "What happened?" Evelyn asked as they made their way back to the wagon. "He offered me a deal." Luke's voice was strange, distant. "Kill Blackwood, and he'll forget about the bounty." "Kill? Why would he want that?" "Because Blackwood owes him money, a lot of money, and dead men don't pay debts." Luke helped her into the wagon. "He gave me a week to decide. Or he collects the bounty and Blackwood gets away with everything." They rode home in silence, each lost in thought. The desert stretched endlessly around them, beautiful and hostile, offering no easy answers. As their cabin came into view, Evelyn made her decision. "We expose Blackwood," she said. "Use my father's journal, gather more evidence, bring him down legally. And if that doesn't work," she looked at the man beside her, "killer, protector, husband, the man who'd shown her strength she didn't know she had, who'd given her a life she'd never imagined. Then we do what we have to," she said quietly. Together, Luke reached over, taking her hand. His thumb traced circles on her palm. A silent promise. Whatever came next, law or violence, justice or revenge, they'd face it as one. The sun was setting as they reached home, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. Another day survived, another night to prepare. Evelyn thought of Crane's pale eyes, of Blackwood's schemes, of all the threats circling like vultures. Let them come, she thought fiercely. They'd learn what two broken people could do when they refused to break further. Evelyn rode into Perdition Creek alone, her father's journal hidden beneath her riding skirt and a derringer tucked in her boot. Luke had argued against it, but she'd been adamant. Someone needed to search her father's office while the courthouse was closed for Sunday services. "You're playing with fire," he'd warned, catching her arm as she prepared to leave. "Then I'll try not to get burned," she'd replied, kissing him quick and fierce before he could protest further. Now, slipping through the side entrance of the courthouse, she wondered if she'd been foolish. The building echoed with emptiness, dust motes dancing in shafts of light from tall windows. Her father's office had been cleared out, but she knew his habits, knew where he hid things he didn't want found, behind the portrait of President Grant. She found the first cache, more journal pages, wrapped in oilcloth. Her hands shook as she read her father's careful documentation. Names of murdered homesteaders, amounts paid for their land, connections to the railroad consortium. And at the center of it all, Judge Cornelius Blackwood. Fascinating reading? Evelyn spun, heart lurching. Blackwood stood in the doorway, his bulk filling the frame. Behind him, two men with deputy's stars and killer's eyes. Judge Blackwood. She forced her voice steady, slipping the papers into her pocket. I was just collecting some of my father's personal effects. On a Sunday? When the courthouse is closed? He stepped into the room, and she backed away instinctively. That could be construed as trespassing, Mrs. Callahan, or perhaps theft. It's not theft to take what belonged to my father. Ah, but it's not yours anymore, is it? Property of a married woman belongs to her husband, and your husband is a condemned criminal. His smile was cold, predatory. I wonder what other crimes you might be guilty of. Harboring a fugitive, perhaps. Conspiracy. Luke was never convicted. The charges will be revisited soon enough. Blackwood moved closer, and she could smell the pomade in his hair, the whiskey on his breath. You should have taken the reformatory, girl. It would have been kinder than what's coming. Evelyn's hand inched toward her boot, toward the derringer, but Blackwood was faster than his bulk suggested. He grabbed her wrist, squeezing until she gasped. Carrying concealed weapons. What would your dear father think? His other hand touched her face, and she jerked away. Such a waste. You could have been useful to me, could have been comfortable. I'd rather be dead. That can be arranged? He released her suddenly, stepping back. Deputy Morrison, escort Mrs. Callahan to the jail. I believe we need to investigate these allegations of theft. You can't. I'm the law in this town. Girl, I can do whatever I please. He picked up the journal pages she'd found, scanning them with mock interest. What's this? Your father's private ravings about conspiracies and murder? The poor man was clearly unwell before his heart gave out. Tragic. Really? The deputies flanked her, hands resting on their guns. Evelyn calculated odds, distances, chances. Even if she got to her derringer, she'd never make it past all three. But in jail, she'd be helpless, unable to warn Luke, unable to... Gunshots exploded outside. All four of them froze, then rushed to the window. In the street below, Luke stood with both pistols drawn, smoke curling from the barrels. Three men lay groaning in the dust. Evelyn Monroe Callahan. Luke's voice carried clear and strong. Your husband's here to collect you. More men poured from the saloons and shops, some reaching for weapons, others diving for cover. But Luke stood calm in the center of the street, a strange smile on his face. Any man who touches my wife dies, he announced conversationally. That includes judges, deputies, and anyone else fool enough to try. He's gone mad, one of the deputies muttered. But Evelyn saw the calculation in Luke's stance, the way he'd positioned himself with clear lines of sight. Cover within reach. Not mad, tactical. Arrest him, Blackwood bellowed from the window. Shoot him down. Several men started forward, then hesitated as Luke's guns tracked their movement with lazy precision. I'd think twice, boys, he called out. Ask yourselves if Blackwood's paying you enough to die today. In the office, Blackwood's face had gone purple. Deputy Morrison, take 20 men and... Judge. Morrison's voice was careful. That's Luke Callahan down there. Man who outdrew Tom McLaury and killed all 7 of the Garrison gang. 20 men might not be enough. Then get 30. Get 50. Or, Evelyn said quietly, you could let me go. Blackwood rounded on her. You think this changes anything? Your husband just signed his own death warrant. Maybe, but how many men will he take with him? She moved toward the door, gambling on their uncertainty. How many widows will curse your name? Judge, how many orphans? The deputies looked at each other, clearly reconsidering their career choices. Outside, Luke had been joined by an unexpected ally, Marshal Dixon, badge glinting in the sun. Seems there's been a misunderstanding. Dixon's voice carried through the window. Mrs. Callahan was retrieving personal property with my permission. Anyone who says different is calling me a liar. The political calculation was visible on Blackwood's face. Dixon was federal, not territorial. Killing him would bring investigations, questions, exactly the kind of scrutiny Blackwood couldn't afford. "Let her go," he said finally, voice thick with rage. "But this isn't over." Evelyn didn't wait for him to change his mind. She walked from the courthouse with measured steps, fighting the urge to run. Luke met her halfway, pulling her against him with one arm while keeping his gun hand free. "I told you not to come alone," he murmured against her hair. "I found evidence, more than enough to—" Later, he was already backing toward their horses, eyes scanning rooftops and windows. Dixon can only hold them so long. They rode hard, not speaking until the town disappeared behind them. Then Luke pulled up, turning to really look at her. "Are you hurt? Did they—" "I'm fine." She pulled out the journal pages. "But Luke, what my father found, it's worse than we thought. Blackwood isn't just stealing land. He's selling information to foreign interests, planning to give them control of the railroad routes. It's treason." Luke whistled low. "No wonder he wants us dead. We have to get this to the federal authorities, to someone who can— First, we have to survive the night." Luke's face was grim. "I may have bought us time, but I also painted a target on our backs visible from space. Every gun in the territory will be coming for us now." They reached the cabin as the sun began its descent. Luke immediately began preparations, checking weapons, positioning ammunition, filling every available container with water. "There's something else," Evelyn said, watching him work. "Blackwood mentioned the charges against you being revisited. He's planning something." "Let him plan." Luke's smile was sharp. "Man's got to be alive to see his plans through. You're thinking of taking Crane's deal. I'm thinking of keeping you alive. By becoming exactly what they say you are. A killer for hire." Luke paused, a box of bullets in his hand. "I've been that for years. Evelyn, only difference is, this time I'd have a better reason." "No." She crossed to him, taking his face in her hands. "You're more than that now. We're more than that. Are we?" His eyes searched hers. "What are we exactly?" "Evelyn, what is this between us?" The question hung in the air, demanding truth. They danced around it for weeks, this connection that went deeper than convenience, stronger than circumstances. "I love you," she said simply. "God help me, I love you. Luke Callahan, not because you saved me, not because I had no choice, but because you see me, the real me, not the judge's daughter or the proper lady, but the woman who'd rather face rattlesnakes than tea parties." His hands came up to cover hers. "Evelyn, and you don't have to say it back. I know it's complicated with Sarah, with—" He kissed her, stopping the flow of words. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Sarah's been gone 3 years, he said roughly. "I loved her, will always love her, but she's gone, and you're here, and Evelyn, Christ, woman, you make me want to live. Not just survive, but live. That terrifies me more than any bullet." "Then be terrified," she whispered. "Be terrified, and choose to live anyway." This time, when they kissed, it was with the desperation of people who knew time was precious, finite. They barely made it to the bed, hands fumbling with buttons and laces. Need overcoming patience. Their joining was neither gentle nor practiced. It was raw, honest, two people claiming each other against all odds, against all reason. Evelyn had imagined this moment would be frightening, painful. Instead, it was like coming home to a place she'd never known existed. After, they lay entwined, sweat cooling on their skin, listening to each other's heartbeats slow. "No regrets?" Luke asked, fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "Only that we waited so long." He huffed a laugh. "We've known each other 6 weeks. Feels like a lifetime. Feels like not enough." The words brought reality crashing back. Outside, night was falling, and with it would come whatever Blackwood had planned. "We could still run," Luke said quietly. "Take the evidence. Head for California. Start over where no one knows us. And let him win. Let him destroy more families, steal more land. Evelyn shook her head. My father died trying to stop him. I won't dishonor that by running. Your father would want you alive. My father would want justice. She sat up, not bothering with the sheet. And so do I. Luke studied her in the lamplight, fierce and naked and unashamed. You know this likely ends with both of us dead. Then we make it count. She traced the scar on his chest, another on his ribs. So many close calls, so many times death had missed by inches. Besides, you're too mean to die easy, remember? And you're too stubborn to let me die alone. They dressed in comfortable silence, preparing for siege. As Luke loaded rifles by the windows, Evelyn made coffee and sandwiches. If they were going to fight, they'd need strength. Tell me about after, she said suddenly. If we survive this, if we win, tell me about our life. Luke paused in his preparations. California, he said slowly. Little ranch in the valley, nothing fancy, but ours. Raise horses, maybe cattle, build it up slow and steady. Children? The word hung between them, fragile as spun glass. If you want, he said carefully. If we're blessed. I want. She moved to stand beside him at the window, looking out at the darkening desert. I want everything. Luke. Every sunrise, every ordinary day, every— Riders, he interrupted, tension snapping back into his frame. 6, maybe 7. Evelyn grabbed her rifle, checking the load. Her hands were steady, her heartbeat calm. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Evelyn, Luke caught her arm. If something happens to me, nothing's happening to you. But if it does, then I'll kill them all and drag you back from hell myself, she said fiercely. We're partners, Luke Callahan, in life and death and everything between. He kissed her hard and fast. God, I love you. Tell me again when this is over. Every day, he promised. Every damn day. The riders were closer now, spreading out in attack formation. Evelyn recognized the lead man, Deputy Morrison, still wearing his star like it meant something. Lucas Callahan, Morrison's voice carried across the desert. You're under arrest for murder, attempted murder, and disturbing the peace. Come out with your hands up. That's a lot of charges. Morrison, Luke called back. You sure you can count that high? This doesn't concern your wife. Send her out, and we'll— Evelyn's shot cut him off, kicking up dust inches from his horse's hooves. I appreciate the concern, Deputy, but I'll stay with my husband. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a statement. Luke and Evelyn fought like they'd been doing it for years, covering each other's reloads, calling out positions, creating overlapping fields of fire that kept the attackers pinned down. When Morrison tried to flank them, Evelyn was ready. When another deputy rushed the door, Luke dropped him with surgical precision. They moved together like dancers, deadly and graceful. After 20 minutes, the remaining attackers retreated, dragging their wounded. In the sudden silence, Evelyn could hear her own harsh breathing, the ring of gunfire still echoing in her ears. Think they'll be back? She asked. Not tonight, but tomorrow, with more men. Luke was already planning. She could see it in his eyes. We bought time, but not much. Then we'd better make use of it. They spent the rest of the night preparing, not just for battle, but for what came after. Evelyn wrote out her father's findings in clear, concise language. Luke drew maps of Blackwood's land grabs. Together, they built a case that even a corrupt territorial government couldn't ignore. As dawn approached, they made love again, slower this time, memorizing each touch, each whispered word, because they both knew that when the sun rose, it might be for the last time. But when the first light painted the desert gold, they stood together at the window, watching the horizon, ready for whatever came. Ready to fight, ready to die if necessary, but most of all, ready to live, fierce and free and unafraid. No regrets? Luke asked, echoing his question from the night before. Never, Evelyn replied, checking her rifle one more time. Whatever happens, Luke Callahan, Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Even if it kills us? Especially then. She smiled, wild and beautiful in the morning light. At least we'll go down fighting, together. And as the dust cloud of approaching riders appeared on the horizon, that's exactly what they prepared to do. Luke made the hardest decision of his life as the sun climbed higher, revealing not just a dust cloud, but what looked like half the territory riding toward them. "You have to go," he told Evelyn, already saddling the fastest horse. "Take the evidence to Fort Huachuca. The commander there is straight. He'll listen." "I'm not leaving you." She grabbed his arm, fingers digging in desperately. "This isn't a debate." He pressed the saddlebags into her hands, heavy with her father's journals and their documentation. "Someone has to survive to tell the truth. That's you. Luke, I'll buy you time. Lead them away. Make them chase me." He cupped her face, memorizing every detail. "With luck, I'll meet you at the fort. Without it." He kissed her, pouring everything he couldn't say into that contact. "Live, Evelyn, live and make this count." Before she could protest further, he was lifting her onto the horse. "There's a box canyon 5 miles north. I'll lead them there. The echoes will make it sound like more guns than I have. You ride south, hard as you can. I hate this plan. I know." He slapped the horse's rump, sending it lurching forward. "Now go!" Evelyn looked back once, seeing Luke standing alone in front of their cabin, checking his weapons with deadly calm. Everything in her screamed to turn back, to stand with him. But she had the evidence. She had the truth. And sometimes that mattered more than what the heart wanted. She rode hard, pushing the horse to its limits. Behind her, she heard the first crack of gunfire, echoing across the desert. Each shot was a knife to her heart, not knowing if Luke was firing or being fired upon. The old mail road to Fort Huachuca stretched endlessly before her, shimmering in the heat. She'd gone perhaps 10 miles when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Her heart leaped. Luke then plummeted as she recognized the rider, Josiah Crane, moving with unhurried purpose, his pale horse eating up the distance between them. Evelyn urged her mount faster, but it was already lathered with sweat. Stumbling, Crane's fresh horse gained steadily. She could try to shoot, but hitting anything from a galloping horse was mostly luck, and Crane wouldn't miss his return fire. Instead, she made for the rocks ahead, a tumbled maze of boulders where a horse couldn't follow. She barely made it, throwing herself from the saddle as Crane's first shot whined off stone. "Mrs. Callahan." His voice was conversational, as if they were meeting for tea. "This needn't be unpleasant. Give me the journals, and you can go." "Go where?" She pressed against a boulder, checking her rifle. "Back to watch my husband die. Your husband made his choice. He's probably dead already." Footsteps, measured and careful, working around her position. "But you don't have to be. Blackwood only wants the evidence destroyed. You could disappear, start fresh somewhere, with my husband's blood on my hands." "I think not. Such loyalty to a man you've known. 2 months? Time has nothing to do with it." She moved carefully, trying to keep rock between them. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." Something in his voice made her pause. "Have you ever loved anyone, Mr. Crane?" A long silence. Then, once, she died because I was too slow, too weak. After that, nothing much mattered except being faster, stronger. "Luke was the same," Evelyn said, seeing an opening. "Lost his wife and child, became what the world told him he was. A killer. And yet you married him, because I saw what he could be." "What he is underneath." She risked a glance around the boulder. Crane stood in the open, gun lowered but ready, just as someone might see past what you've become. Pretty words. Mrs. Callahan. But words don't change facts. No, actions do. She made her decision. "I'll make you a deal, Mr. Crane. Help me get this evidence to Fort Huachuca, and I'll pay you double what Blackwood offered." He actually laughed. "With what money?" "The money Blackwood stole from murdered homesteaders. It's all documented here, bank accounts, amounts. A clever man could access those funds. Make things right. She stepped into view, rifle pointed down. Or you could kill me, destroy the evidence, and let him keep profiting from murder. Crane studied her for a long moment. Your husband said you were remarkable. I'm beginning to see why. Is that a yes? Instead of answering, he holstered his gun and walked to his horse, pulling out field glasses. He studied the horizon, then handed them to her. Look north, the canyon, with trembling hands. Evelyn focused the glasses. She could see the dust and smoke of battle, tiny figures moving among the rocks. And there, her heart clenched. Luke, still fighting, using the terrain to make it seem like multiple defenders. He's holding them, Crane observed. But not for much longer. They're moving to flank. Then we have to complete your mission. His pale eyes were unreadable. That's what he's buying time for. Everything in her rebelled against leaving Luke to fight alone. But Crane was right. The evidence had to reach Fort Huachuca. That was the plan. That was what Luke was possibly dying for. All right, she said, voice steady despite the tears threatening. But when this is done, we come back for him. If there's anything to come back to. They rode hard, Crane setting a punishing pace. He knew the country, leading them through shortcuts and hidden paths. As they rode, he shared fragments of information. Blackwood's planning to move tonight, has buyers coming from back east, politicians and railroad money. Once those deals are signed, the evidence won't matter, Evelyn finished. They'll have too much invested to let justice interfere. Exactly. So we don't just need to reach the fort. We need to reach it before sunset. They pushed harder, horses laboring in the heat. At a small spring, they paused just long enough to water the animals. Evelyn took the opportunity to reload her weapons, trying not to think about Luke, about what might be happening in that canyon. He's tougher than he looks, Crane said suddenly. Seen him shot 3 times in Denver, still walked away under his own power. You're trying to comfort me? Stating facts. He checked his own weapons with practiced efficiency. Man like that doesn't die easy. They were perhaps 5 miles from the fort when the ambush came. Blackwood had sent men ahead, guessing their destination. Gunfire erupted from both sides of the trail, forcing them to cover. How many? Evelyn shouted over the noise. 4, maybe 5. Crane was already moving. Deadly efficient. His first 2 shots dropped 2 attackers before they could blink. Can you make the fort from here? Not without you. Wasn't a question. He shoved the saddlebags at her. Ride straight for the gates. Don't stop. Don't look back. Crane, this is what I do. Mrs. Callahan, what I'm good at. He smiled, a real expression for once. Besides, I'm curious to see if your husband survived. Man who inspires this kind of loyalty. Might be worth knowing. Before she could argue, he was up and firing, drawing the attacker's attention. Evelyn didn't waste his sacrifice. She spurred her exhausted horse toward the fort, riding low, making herself small. Behind her, the gunfight intensified. She heard Crane's weapons speaking with deadly precision, answered by increasingly sporadic return fire. Then, as the fort gates came into view, silence. The sentries saw her coming. Saw the pursuit that followed, 2 riders who'd escaped Crane's ambush. They opened the gates, and soldiers poured out, rifles ready. The pursuers wheeled away, unwilling to face military odds. Commander Reynolds, Evelyn gasped out, half falling from her horse. I need to see Commander Reynolds immediately. What followed was a blur, uniformed men, questions, blessed water for her parched throat. Then she was in the commander's office, spreading her father's evidence across his desk, words tumbling over each other as she explained. Reynolds, a stern man with intelligent eyes, studied the documents carefully. This is extensive and damning. He looked up sharply. You're Judge Monroe's daughter. Yes, and Luke Callahan's wife, the gunslinger, the man who's probably dying right now to give me time to reach you. Her voice broke slightly. Please, Commander, send men. Stop this. Reynolds was already calling for his adjutant. Lieutenant Morrison, no relation to that corrupt deputy. I hope, ready 2 companies, full battle gear. He turned back to Evelyn. We'll need your testimony. Mrs. Callahan, official statements. After, she said firmly. After we save my husband. The ride back was a nightmare of hope and dread. Evelyn rode with the soldiers, Reynolds having insisted on leading the force personally. The evidence was too important, the implications too far-reaching, to trust to subordinates. They met Crane a mile from the fort, bloody but upright, walking his horse with its reins in his left hand, right arm hanging useless. Mrs. Callahan, he said calmly, as if they'd met for a stroll. Commander, you need medical attention, Reynolds observed. Later. Crane's pale eyes fixed on Evelyn. The canyon. They broke off the attack an hour ago. Headed back toward town. Don't know why. Evelyn's heart clenched. That could mean Luke had driven them off, or that he was already dead. The job finished. They pushed hard for the canyon, the soldiers keeping pace despite the brutal heat. As they approached, Evelyn saw bodies scattered among the rocks, attackers who'd paid for their assault, but no sign of Luke. There, Crane pointed with his good hand. The cabin. They could see figures around the small homestead, and Evelyn's heart nearly stopped. Then she recognized Marshal Dixon's distinctive hat, and hope bloomed painful in her chest. As they thundered up, Dixon emerged from the cabin, relief clear on his weathered face. Commander Reynolds, glad you could make it to the party. My husband. Evelyn was off her horse before it fully stopped. Where is... Inside. Dixon caught her arm. He's alive. Mrs. Callahan. Shot up some, but too ornery to die. She pushed past him, heart hammering. Luke lay on their bed, bandages wrapped around his shoulder and side. His eyes were closed, face pale beneath the tan, but his chest rose and fell steadily. Luke. She dropped beside the bed, taking his hand. His eyes opened slowly, focusing with effort. Evelyn? His voice was rough, disbelieving. You're supposed to be... At the fort. I brought help. Tears ran unchecked down her cheeks. You beautiful, stubborn fool. You were supposed to run. Couldn't... He managed a ghost of his usual smile. They might have followed you. Had to make sure. Shh. She kissed his forehead, his cheeks, careful of his injuries. You did it. We did it. Outside, she could hear Reynolds giving orders, organizing the arrest of Blackwood and his conspirators. Justice was finally coming to Perdition Creek. But in that moment, all that mattered was the warm, living presence of her husband's hand in hers. Crane, Luke asked suddenly. Saw him riding out. He helped me. Got shot for it, but he's too mean to die. She smiled through her tears. Sound familiar? Must be something in the water out here. Doc Morrison, the honest one from the fort, bustled in to check Luke's wounds. 2 bullets, clean through, lost blood, but no vital damage. Week or 2 of rest. He'll be good as new. Hear that? Evelyn squeezed Luke's hand. You're going to live? Disappointed? Furious, she said, but her smile gave her away. Now I'm stuck with you. Could get that annulment Blackwood was so keen on, Luke suggested, eyes twinkling despite the pain. Marry someone respectable. Too late. I've developed a taste for disreputable men. She leaned close. Besides, someone has to keep you from getting shot. Been doing a bang-up job so far. I'm still learning. Give me time. Time. They had time now. The thought was dizzying. Commander Reynolds appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Callahan, I hate to interrupt, but we're moving on the town within the hour. Your testimony can wait, Luke said firmly, struggling to sit up. I'm coming with you. Like hell you are, Evelyn and the doctor said in unison. Blackwood had men at the land office. Luke insisted. Documents that need securing. Without those, I'll go. Evelyn decided. Tell me what to look for. Evelyn. No arguments. Remember, I'm your partner. She kissed him quick and hard. "Trust me." The look he gave her was answer enough. The ride into Perdition Creek with 2 companies of cavalry was vastly different from all her previous arrivals. This time, she rode with authority at her back, justice in her saddlebags, and hope in her heart. Blackwood tried to run. Of course, they caught him at the stage depot, bags full of stolen money and incriminating documents he couldn't bear to burn. The look on his face when he saw Evelyn riding with the soldiers was worth every terrible moment of the past weeks. "You," he snarled as they bound his hands. "You little—" "Judge Blackwood," she interrupted calmly. "You're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, treason, and theft, though I suspect they'll find more charges once they start digging. You can't prove anything." "Actually, I can. My father was very thorough and very clever about where he hid things." She leaned closer. "He knew you'd kill him, but he also knew I'd finish what he started." As they led him away, she felt empty. Not satisfied, not vindicated, just empty. Her father was still dead. Good people had still suffered. Justice wouldn't undo any of that. But it was a start. The land office yielded more evidence. As Luke had predicted, by nightfall, half the town's power structure was under arrest. The other half had fled. Perdition Creek would need new leadership. Honest leadership. "You could stay," Marshal Dixon suggested as they watched the prisoners being loaded for transport. "Town needs someone like you, someone who understands justice." "No." Evelyn looked back toward their cabin, where Luke waited. "We've had enough of this place. Time to find somewhere new." "California? Maybe, or Oregon. Somewhere we can start fresh." She smiled. "Somewhere that's never heard of the Monroes or the Callahans." Dixon touched his hat. "Well, wherever you land, they'll be lucky to have you, both of you." As she rode back to Luke in the gathering darkness, Evelyn thought about futures and fresh starts, about the life they'd build together, one careful day at a time. It wouldn't be easy. They both carried too many scars for easy, but it would be theirs, chosen and cherished. Luke was awake when she arrived, propped up and playing cards with Crane, whose arm was in a sling. "Gentlemen," she said, amused, "should you be gambling in your condition?" "He's terrible at poker," Crane said mildly. "I'm doing him a favor by taking his money." "I'm wounded," Luke protested. "My tells are compromised." "Your tells were compromised before you got shot," Evelyn informed him, settling on the bed beside him. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got shot twice and lived to complain about it." He caught her hand. "Blackwood?" "Arrested, along with half his syndicate. Commander Reynolds says the territorial governor's sending investigators." She laced their fingers together. "It's over, Luke, really over." He brought her hand to his lips. "So what now, Mrs. Callahan?" "Now?" She looked between Luke and Crane, these dangerous men who'd risked everything for justice and for her. "Now we heal, and then—" "California?" Luke suggested. "I hear Montana's nice." Crane offered. "Lots of space. Good place to disappear." "Or," Evelyn said slowly, an idea forming. "We could stay in the territory, not here, but there are other towns, other places that need honest law, honest people." Luke studied her face. "You want to keep fighting. I want to keep building," she corrected. "What we have, what we could be together. A gunslinger and a judge's daughter, keeping the peace." Crane sounded amused. "Could work. A man and his wife," Evelyn said firmly. "Making their way. Everything else is just details." Luke squeezed her hand. "Together, then, whatever comes." "Together," she agreed. Outside, the desert night settled over the land, stars emerging one by one. Inside, 3 unlikely allies sat in comfortable silence, each nursing wounds and contemplating futures. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, but tonight they were alive, they were free, and for now, that was enough. 3 weeks passed in a blur of healing and preparation. Luke's wounds closed clean. leaving new scars to join the collection that mapped his violent history. During his convalescence, territorial investigators descended on Perdition Creek like locusts, taking statements, examining evidence, dismantling Blackwood's empire piece by piece. Evelyn spent her days testifying, her nights beside Luke, planning their future in whispered conversations that lasted until dawn. "We could go today," Luke said one morning, testing his draw. His movements were still stiff, but the deadly precision remained. "Nothing keeping us here now." Evelyn looked around their cabin, scene of so much fear and joy, violence and tenderness. In 6 weeks, it had become more home than her father's house had ever been. But Luke was right. Their ghosts were too thick here, memories seeping from every wall. "Tomorrow," she decided. After? She pulled out a letter that had arrived with the Morning Post. "The territorial governor wants to see us. Both of us." Luke's face went carefully blank. "About?" He didn't say, "But Commander Reynolds will be there." She studied his reaction. "We don't have to go." "Yes, we do." He set down his gun, crossing to where she stood. "You need to see this through proper. Your father would want." My father's wants stopped mattering when he died. But she softened the words by leaning into him. "This is about us now, our choices. Then we choose to hear what he has to say." Luke kissed her temple. "Then we leave. Together." The next morning found them in the territorial capital, dressed in their best clothes, which wasn't saying much after weeks of frontier living. Evelyn had managed to make her one remaining dress presentable, while Luke looked uncomfortable in a borrowed suit that didn't quite hide the gun at his hip. "Stop fidgeting," she murmured as they waited outside the governor's office. "I look like a dressed-up scarecrow. You look distinguished. I look like a killer in a suit." "My killer in a suit," she corrected. Straightening his tie, the door opened before he could respond. Governor Samuel Morrison, no relation to the corrupt deputy, was younger than Evelyn expected, with shrewd eyes and prematurely gray temples. "Mrs. Callahan, Mr. Callahan, please sit." He gestured to chairs before his massive desk. "I've read your testimonies. Remarkable story." "Just the truth, Governor," Evelyn said. "Yes, well, the truth has been in short supply in Perdition Creek." He leaned back, studying them. "Which brings me to why I asked you here. The territory needs new leadership in that region." "Honest leadership." Luke tensed beside her. "If you're thinking of appointing us, I'm thinking of appointing Mrs. Callahan as Justice of the Peace." Morrison interrupted. "First woman to hold such a position in the territory, but given the circumstances and her father's legacy..." Evelyn's breath caught. "Governor, I'm not qualified." "You exposed a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of territorial government. You fought corruption with nothing but courage and conviction. I'd say you're uniquely qualified. My husband would serve as your protection and, if he's willing, as a special deputy marshal." Morrison's gaze shifted to Luke. "Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Callahan. But Marshal Dixon speaks highly of your actions during this affair. Says you're a man who knows the difference between law and justice." "Sometimes they're not the same thing," Luke said quietly. "No," Morrison agreed. "Sometimes they're not, which is why we need people who understand that distinction." Evelyn looked at Luke, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. They'd planned to disappear, to find somewhere their pasts couldn't follow, but maybe we'd want our own terms, she said slowly. "Our own way of doing things, within reason, and protection from old warrants." Luke added, "Man can't uphold the law with a target on his back." Morrison smiled. "Already arranged. Your actions in exposing Blackwood bought you considerable goodwill. Consider your slate clean. Mr. Callahan." They were quiet on the ride back, each lost in thought. As their cabin came into view, Luke finally spoke. "You want to do it." It wasn't a question, but Evelyn answered anyway. I think maybe we're meant to After everything, to have this chance. She turned in the saddle to look at him. But not if you're against it. We're partners. Remember? Justice of the Peace Evelyn Callahan. He tested the words, a slow smile spreading. Has a ring to it. Deputy Marshal Luke Callahan sounds pretty good too. Special Deputy Marshal, he corrected. Apparently, I'm special. She laughed. The sound bright in the desert air. You always were to me. They spent one last night in the cabin where their marriage had transformed from desperate convenience to genuine partnership. As dawn broke, they loaded their few possessions, taking special care with a small box of her father's personal effects and Luke's worn harmonica. Ready? Luke asked, helping her onto the wagon. Evelyn looked back once at the place that had sheltered them, tested them, brought them together. Then she faced forward, toward their new future. Ready. The town they were assigned to, Cedar Falls, was smaller than Perdition Creek, but growing with the railroad's approach. Their arrival caused the expected stir. A female justice of the peace and her gunslinger husband weren't what anyone expected. But Evelyn had learned to use unexpected to her advantage. Their first case involved a dispute over water rights that had nearly escalated to bloodshed. Evelyn listened to both sides, asked careful questions, then rendered a solution that left both parties grumbling but satisfied. The mark of good compromise. Luke told her later. You did good, he said that night as they settled into their new home. A proper house this time, with 2 bedrooms and a kitchen that didn't leak. We did good, she corrected. That man was ready to draw until you stepped forward. Didn't even have to touch my gun. Reputation has its uses. She curled against him on their new bed, a luxury after months on a narrow cot. Think we can make this work? Think we already are. The months that followed proved him right. Evelyn's combination of legal knowledge, compassion, and steel spine earned respect. Luke's presence discouraged violence before it started, and when it couldn't be discouraged, he ended it with minimal bloodshed. They made an odd team, the Lady Justice and the reformed gunslinger, but an effective one. You're getting fat, Evelyn observed one morning, watching Luke struggle with his vest buttons. I'm getting comfortable, he corrected. There's a difference. Uh-huh. She helped with the buttons, then let her hands rest on his chest. Luke. Something in her voice made him still. What is it? I'm late. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. How late? 6 weeks. She couldn't meet his eyes. I wasn't sure, but now, his hands covered hers, trembling slightly. A baby? Maybe, probably. She finally looked up, seeing wonder overtake the shock on his face. Is this? He kissed her, deep and desperate and joyful. When they broke apart, both were crying. I never thought. He pressed his forehead to hers. After Sarah and Thomas, I never thought I'd have another chance. Are you scared? Terrified, he admitted. But the good kind. The kind that means something matters. Doc Pritchard confirmed what they already knew. Come spring, there would be a new Callahan in Cedar Falls. The news spread quickly. Small towns had no secrets, and the reaction surprised them. Instead of scandal, there was celebration. Apparently, the town had adopted them without their knowing, and a baby cemented their belonging. It's like they were waiting for us to make it official, Evelyn mused, accepting yet another knitted blanket from a well-meaning town woman. Maybe they were. Luke watched her from the doorway, still sometimes looking like he couldn't believe his luck. People like to see happiness, gives them hope. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Morning sickness lasted all day, and Evelyn's temper shortened as her body changed. Luke weathered her moods with surprising patience, bringing her peppermint tea and rubbing her swollen feet without complaint. You're too good to me, she said one evening. Emotional over nothing and everything. I'm exactly as good as you deserve, he replied, kissing her forehead. Which means I need to be better. Luke, shh, let me take care of you. Evelyn, let me do this right. Winter came early. blanketing Cedar Falls in snow that transformed the desert landscape into something magical. Evelyn held court wrapped in blankets, rendering justice with a hot water bottle at her back and Luke hovering protectively nearby. "You're worse than a mother hen," she told him after he'd interrupted proceedings for the third time to ask if she needed anything. "You're carrying our child while serving justice in a frontier town," he countered. "I'm allowed to hover." Their child. The words still sent a thrill through her. As spring approached and her time grew near, unexpected visitors arrived. Josiah Crane, looking prosperous in new clothes, his pale eyes warming slightly when he saw Evelyn's condition. "Heard you two were playing house," he said by way of greeting. "Thought I'd see for myself. Still alive, I see," Luke observed, shaking his hand. "Takes more than bullets to stop a man with purpose." Crane produced a wooden toy horse, carved with surprising skill. "For the little one." "You made this?" Evelyn asked, touched. Man needs hobbies between jobs. He shrugged, uncomfortable with sentiment. "Besides, figured any child of yours too would need all the help it could get." He stayed for a week, he and Luke talking late into the nights, two former killers finding brotherhood in redemption. When he left, it was with promises to return, to be the unlikely uncle their child would need. "Strange family we're building," Evelyn observed. "Best kind." Luke replied. Marshal Dixon arrived next, bringing news from Perdition Creek, rebuilt under honest leadership. Blackwood Syndicate fully dismantled. Justice finally served. "Your father would be proud," he told Evelyn. "What you've built here, what you've become." "I hope so," she said softly, one hand on her swollen belly. "I want to tell this little one stories about their grandfather. Good stories. Then tell them about a man who stood for justice," Dixon said, "who raised a daughter strong enough to finish what he started." The baby came with the spring floods, as if even birth had to be dramatic in their lives. Evelyn's water broke during a dispute over cattle theft, leading to the most unusual recess in territorial history. "Can't you hold it in?" Luke asked frantically as he helped her to Doc Pritchard's office. "Oh, yes. Let me just tell the baby to wait until the court schedule clears." She snapped, then gasped as another contraction hit. "Luke Callahan, if you ever touch me again." "I love you too," he said, white-faced but steady. The labor was long and difficult, testing Evelyn's endurance as thoroughly as any desert survival. Luke stayed throughout, letting her crush his hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement when she wanted to give up. "I can't," she sobbed after hours of pain. "Luke, I can't." "Yes, you can." His voice was fierce with faith. "You're Evelyn Monroe Callahan. You faced down corrupt judges and rattlesnakes and me at my worst. You can do this." "I'm scared." "So am I. But we're together. That's all that matters." When their daughter finally arrived, screaming and perfect in absolutely everything, Luke wept openly, no shame in his tears. "She's beautiful," he breathed, cradling the tiny bundle with hands that had dealt so much death now holding new life. "God, Evelyn, look what we made." "Sarah," Evelyn said softly. "I'd like to call her Sarah, if—" Luke's tears came harder. "Sarah Hope Callahan. For the past and the future." "Sarah Hope," Evelyn agreed, touching their daughter's downy head. "Our miracle." They brought her home to find the entire town had conspired to prepare the nursery, filling it with hand-sewn blankets, carved toys, and enough good wishes to last a lifetime. "Seems she's got herself a whole town of aunts and uncles," Luke observed, watching their neighbors celebrate in the street. "Good," Evelyn said firmly. "She'll need them all." As night fell on their first day as a family of 3, they sat on their porch, so different from that ramshackle cabin where they'd started. Sarah slept in Luke's arms while Evelyn leaned against his shoulder, both of them marveling at how far they'd come. "Any regrets?" Luke asked, echoing their old ritual. "Not one." Evelyn replied, "You? Only that it took so long to find you." "We found each other when we needed to," she said. "That's what matters." In the distance, coyotes called to the rising moon. their song wild and free. But here, in this small circle of light and love, two broken people had built something whole, something worth fighting for, something worth living for. "I love you, Mrs. Callahan," Luke whispered against her hair. "I love you too, Mr. Callahan." She smiled at their sleeping daughter. "Both of you, forever." And in the vast desert night, under stars that had witnessed so much pain and triumph, the Callahan family began their next chapter, not with guns or courtrooms, but with lullabies and promises and the quiet certainty that love, in the end, conquers all. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility. There would be challenges. There always were in the territory. But they would face them as they had everything else, together. In the morning, Evelyn would return to her courtroom, rendering justice with a baby at her breast if necessary. Luke would keep the peace, his reputation gentled by fatherhood but no less effective. Sarah would grow up strong and loved, surrounded by the strangest, best family the frontier had ever seen. But tonight, they simply held each other, three hearts beating as one, proof that sometimes the most beautiful endings are actually beginnings in disguise. And somewhere in the desert, the ghost of Judge Theodore Monroe smiled and faded into starlight, his daughter's happiness the only justice he'd ever really wanted. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Evelyn and Luke's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to hear from cowboys and cowgirls around the world in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more tales of romance and redemption from the American frontier. What did you think of Evelyn and Luke's story? Share your thoughts. I read every comment. Until next time, partners, happy trails.